Well, earlier I spoke to Laura Carlsen from the Center for International Policy. She said violence against women is especially common in Mexico, obviously.
Violence against women in Mexico is on the rise again because violence in general is on the rise. We've had another peak year for homicides in Mexico, and one of the big reasons, as always, is the conflicts between organized crime groups and also between organized crime and public security and armed forces. This causes a general situation of violence, and it tends to spike violence against women as well. The second factor that's really important is what we call impunity. And that means that in this country, less than 10% of crimes are actually tried and punished. So when you have a very patriarchal society like Mexico's with a lot of machismo, then if there's a situation where men know, basically, that they can beat a woman and there will be no consequences, unfortunately, it happens a lot. We've seen this rise in many states. That's the other thing that's going on. It's no longer really just concentrated on the border, as in Ciudad Juarez, which is famous, unfortunately, for femicides, but it's also found in many other parts of the country. And although there do happen to be higher levels in certain states than others, it's clearly a generalized problem that, despite a lot of public attention, has not at all been resolved.
Tell us about this so-called gender alert. Has this been put in place?
Yes, they have put in place a gender alert. What happens is if there's a better system for monitoring the number of femicides that take place within society. And so when they see that there's a spike, when there's a dangerous level of femicides, they can put into effect a gender alert, usually on a state level. And that means that state security forces have to put a high priority on all cases of violence against women. They have to attend much better than they usually do, unfortunately, the complaints of women who may be in a very dangerous situation and could possibly lead to assassinations. And they have a whole system in which women's groups as well participate to monitor the situation and try to keep it from getting out of control. This has worked to some extent, but there hasn't been enough use of the mechanism, and there hasn't been a complete implementation of the protocols that should go into place when there is a dangerous situation in terms of violence against women in a particular area.
Tell us why the Mexican government has been slow to respond to the issue.
The Mexican government actually responds to the issue because this has been going on. There's been an identified problem of femicides, especially on the border, since the mid-90s. So what they do is they create these special prosecutors. They have a fairly good legal framework, in fact, but when it comes to application of the law, it just isn't happening. Now, the big gap there is really because, again, of so much discrimination against women in society. Lawmakers and people who enforce the law do not take a woman's word at its word. They will often say, well, probably something else is going on, or it's not as bad as you say. And so situations get worse and worse. Women are isolated in situations of violence. And in the end, you can have a tragic result, as so often happens.
And that was Laura Carlsen speaking with us.